Our students realized we were in Squaxin traditional territory as we worked with them on the Kukwas wet site. Then they realized we didn't have anything here that was Squaxin. So what they did was commission master carver Andrea Wilbur-Seigel and her husband Steve to do a cedar welcome pole. It was their very first, and it's if you want to take a break, just go to the left here, walk around all this construction, and in front of our library is a welcome pole that they made, and welcoming our students into the library. Our president, Dr. Gerald Pumphrey, is going to be here a bit later at 2:30 to say hello to Ruth and Dick, and and he warmly welcomes you to our campus. I know some of you came some great distances, and I really want to thank you for that. We want you to personally thank Dick, Dr. Doherty, for all of, but particularly for his teachings, for his visions, for his directions, and that's for all of us. All of us, he's given us that kind of help and influenced all of us. And Paul Gleason, who helped us put this together, will be talking to his visions here shortly, because he is one of the persons that's lived through a lot of your visions, Dick. So that. I want to thank the SBSCC Anthro Club for putting this on. They sponsored it, they organized, they decorated it. There was over 100 balloons in here. I said, aren't we getting a lot of balloons? He said, oh, never too much balloons. So they've been filling them with our helium tanks. And that's Kathleen Hawes is here. She's my co-advisor. Where's Kathleen? Kathleen's here. And our co-presidents, Ekaterina Balakuriva, did your name tags, right? Kate, Ekaterina, and the other co-president who's selling Dick and Ruth's books, Archaeology in Washington, as a club fundraiser, or I don't know if Tracy's out here yet. Tracy Arnold, and the other former president is here doing that too. Cassie Johnson, who's moving on to Brand X, across the way, Evergreen State College. Who's here from Evergreen? No, I should say. No. Okay, and we also have Ina Vitelli. Where's Ina? From the club. And she's hiding. She's helping with beverages, so help yourself to the foods. Trevor Yunker did the PR, did the posters. So we actually have gift posters that are all rolled up in rubber bands for you to take home that are welcome you, that you might have gotten on the email. And then we have one here for Dick and Ruth. You could give them to, that's you, Emma. And Emma is our treasurer. If you could give it to Dr. Doherty and Ruth Kirk. Thank you. She's the treasurer. I also like to thank the Pacific Northwest Archaeological Society that sponsored the catering and all this food. Is the food good? Yes. Good. And help yourself. Even, walk by us here, don't worry. Just help yourself to the food, and remember, check with any of the elders here if they'd like it, if they need a drink, if they need any food, as well as if they need a place to sit. Check with them. And I learned that actually from David Whitener, who early 70s, you might remember, was principal of your school at Neah Bay. And when I was working with the master weavers, Isabel Itis and Lena McGee Kaplanaho, he made it real clear to me that was my job. I had to make sure if they needed water, coffee, and then of course the roll from the cafeteria, just get, you got to do it. That's your job. So that's very important to do while you're here. And Dave was longtime chair of the Squaxin Island Tribe and helped set up the Evergreen State College Native American program. PNWAS, the Archaeological Society, is also doing I got it here, program April 13th, which Dr. Doherty and Ruth will be introducing. And these flyers are in the gallery there, but it's about the Manus discoveries, the pre-Clovis, 13,800-year-old evidence of hunters hunting mastodons. And this will be at REI in Seattle. And Dr. Carl Gustafson is with us today. You might want to talk to him. Where's Carl? See, Carl. And there he is. There's Carl. Again, you can pick one of these up April 13th, Friday night, next month. And Claire Manus Hattler is here too, and her husband. Where's Claire? The owners of the site. Yeah, so she's going to be speaking with Carl. We're very excited about this program. Thank you. Whose idea was this party? I don't know if she's even here yet. Is Dr. Allison Brooks here yet, the State Historic Preservation Officer? She's scheduled to talk, but we actually stole the idea from her, so it's good she's not here, especially as SHPO, if you know what I mean. Is she here? Good. So don't tell her I told you that, but Kathleen and I were at the state office, and she comes, Dr. Allison Brooks comes out and says, we got to have a party. Let's do a party for Ruth and Dick. And thought that was a pretty good idea. And then Scott Williams called me up. He's an adjunct with our department here and said, gee, we should have a party. Let's plan a party for Dr. Doherty for his 90th. And so it was really his idea, too, to get it here. And we then went to the Anthro Club. They loved the idea. Then we also collaborated with Ruth Kirk. She's Ruth Kirk Doherty kept this a secret. Was this a surprise, Dick? Okay. They didn't want them too surprised, so I think they let them know a little. And also, we needed a supreme organizer, so we found Paul Gleason. Gleason is going to speak to many of the visions that we are celebrating here through Doc's efforts. First of all, I'd like to have a letter we got read from U.S. Congressman Norm Dick. Sent you greetings and a happy birthday wish, Dick. U.S. Congressman Norm Dix and Kathleen Hawes, who helped plan this, has agreed to read this for you. Kathleen?
All right, I'll go ahead and read it to you. It's to Richard from Norm. Dear Dick, it is with great pleasure that I join your family and many friends in sending congratulations to you as you celebrate your 90th birthday. This is a great milestone and a time for reflecting on your many achievements, as well as on the friendships that you have made through your long involvement in preserving important aspects of our cultural heritage in Washington State. Early on in your professional life, you understood the value in engaging a wide variety of citizens, including elected officials, in support of your endeavors. I recall quite well your work with Senator Magnuson on the MARMS project in the 1960s, in addition to your efforts to involve the academic, civic, and political leadership in the Ozette dig. It was your unique ability to prioritize the protection and interpretation of this amazing collection that resulted in the formation of the Makah Cultural and Research Center in Neah Bay, and we all remain grateful for the commitment and dedication you demonstrated on behalf of this project. Most of all, I want you to know how much I appreciate your approach to professional archaeology and the inspiration you have given to generations of students, and still do give, and archaeological field schools, as well as to all citizens of our state, an important and enduring legacy. Best wishes to you and Ruth as you celebrate this important birthday. Sincerely, Norm Dix.
Clallam County Commissioner Mike Doherty has a proclamation he's going to present. Came down from Port Angeles like many of you came from that county today. Thanks for coming, Mike.
So thanks, Dale. So as chairman of our Board of Commissioners, when I heard that this was going to happen, I thought for sure I should run down, say thank you on behalf of the residents of Clallam County, certainly the whole North Olympic Peninsula. It's quite an honor to have the history told and the artifacts found way back late 60s, and see a time when my father was a prosecutor, so I knew a lot of the elders, and some of those artifacts that came out of the dig helped the Makah save a number of their stories, because there are a couple of generations that they were able to show artifacts. They could interpret some things while they were still alive. Very important find. So then we recent visitors could gain a lot of knowledge about our new neighborhood. So we're very grateful. So on behalf of 70,000 residents of Clallam County, 400 employees, a lot of visitors, the Board of Commissioners passed a proclamation. I won't read it today. It's quite lengthy, but it recounts the importance of the 1947 trip as a young archaeologist up the coast surveying sites, certainly the importance of the Ozette dig, some of the important sites after that when he had some of his disciples like Dale working at HOCO, his other disciples, Jeff Mauger teaches at local community college, Paul's been the head archaeologist at Olympic National Park, a number of others who had a great opportunity at Ozette to find enough of a background and hands-on work that later led them to their professional careers, and many of those have benefited Clallam County and the north end of the peninsula. And then the proclamation recounts some other important items in Dr. Doherty's career. So, but again, I won't read it. But I did want to mention, when I heard this was happening and through Dale contacted Ruth, I said, well, when we do a proclamation, usually we like a little factual information because it's kind of an official record of the Board of Commissioners. Does he have a resume? So Ruth said, Doc precedes the digital age. He's got a lot of scraps around in a room and on his desk. Maybe I can find enough to have 3 or 4 or 5 pages. We'll see. Give me a couple weeks. So a couple weeks went by and she was up to, I think it was a dozen pages, 13 pages, 15 pages. And there were small references in a couple of places saying, instead of going on more pages, it just would say, and he did other surveys, presented papers in Russia, Japan, Spain, that summarized, I suspect, a lot of work, but they were just these little pockets of information that referenced a lot of others. So thank you, Ruth, for putting together that resume. It's a wonderful documentation of a great career, and I don't know Doc all that well, but I suspect he's very grateful too, because he apparently had never taken the time to do all that detailed work. So there's 16 pages at least, single-spaced items that maybe Dale can make a copy. So thank you on behalf of the people of Clallam County for your great work, Doc. You've kidded me in the past. He spells Doherty differently than the real Irish way. So next time you're in Clallam County, we'll debate that again.
Thank you, Mike. One thing I've learned in 20 years in Clallam County, it is really hard not only to follow Doc, but to follow Mike, because he's got a great way of speaking. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. It's really great for me as my part of WSU and working with Doc starting about, I figured about 44 years ago, 5 years ago. It's a long time ago. But it's great to see people like Gus and Jim Chatters, Dave Rice, Benny Keel, people that go way back to some of the earlier stuff. And I had a great talk, by the way, with Rick Sprague, and he sends his wishes and wishes that he could be here. But Rick was Doc's first MA student. And so, anyway, it was good to talk to Rick. Anyway, as I said, we're here to celebrate Doc's 90th birthday. He's been a major force in protecting the heritage of the Olympic Peninsula, the state of Washington, and the country as a whole. Born in Aberdeen in 1922, he served as a Navy blimp pilot, flying submarine patrol over the Atlantic. Afterwards, he returned to the University of Washington to complete his BA and PhD. In 1947, while still a graduate student, he did the first archaeological survey of the Washington coast. and it gets better. Then he went on to do his PhD research on the Hoh Reservation, working with the Hoh tribe. Doc's contributions to the advancement of archaeology have been many. Excavating the Channel Scabland sites in eastern Washington brought recognition of the need for an interdisciplinary approach to the understanding of human history. This led to a major grant with the National Science Foundation for archaeology and interdisciplinary studies, and then led eventually to the Quaternary Studies program, which many of us profited by. All of these were groundbreakers. We were sort of in the middle of it, but didn't realize at the time how fantastic an opportunity we had. As students, our training we've gone on to teach at colleges and universities, to manage cultural resources for local, state, and federal agencies, to hold policy positions throughout the government with interior, agriculture, and defense. They've played critical roles in setting and redefining cultural resource management standards as they evolved across the nation. For many of us, DOC's activities in many respects served as an example of what we should do if we were working for the Park Service, the Corps, or whoever. And the big problem was, as many of us know, such as Leslie and David, there was no guidelines out there. We made them up as we go, and it was DOC's example that helped us understand. And I think especially the idea of these are community resources. It was really, really important for us to keep coming back to. DOC further served on the initial Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and he was a leader in recognizing that the Historic Preservation Act supported archaeology as much as it did the preservation of historic structure. His influence in this regard actually reached beyond, as I said, his national service, his classroom work, his archaeological field schools, to the entire communities. He continually made it clear that he was working to uncover community resources, whether historic or prehistoric. Excavation sites were open to the public. Tours were given daily. Boy, don't we all know that. Okay, line up, you're gonna go talk to the public. It was a really great experience. School groups were encouraged to visit. Volunteers, especially from the local communities, were welcome. Slideshows were presented for the asking at meetings of community service groups. Probably, though, the most important example that I can remember working with DOC coming out in 1966 and progressing on was the active involvement with the Native American community was particularly sought. DOC made it clear to the students that the archaeologists must work in partnership with the tribes. After all, we were working on the tribal traditional lands, and we must respect them. Long before laws were in place, he worked with tribal governments as equals in managing archaeological resources. And again, for those students of us who are working with DOC, that was a fantastic learning experience of how to work together in partnership. The sites discovered and investigated by DOC are legion, as we know. In eastern Washington, he worked at Moses Lake, Potholes, and Lynn Cooley, along with the Snake River and the Snake and Columbia rivers. He led negotiations, if you want to call it negotiations, with the Army Corps of Engineers, funding salvage sites ahead of inundation reservoirs. DOC had a way of presenting things, I think, to the Colonel that the Colonel could not say no. And I grew up in New England, and I understood that sort of thing. Well, I've just made you an offer. You cannot say no. Yeah, I often wondered if DOC had been in New England, which mob he would have been. Never mind. Out of this came the discovery of the Marms rock shelter investigations, with the discovery of the human remains dating back 11,000 years ago, at that time the oldest in North America. In western Washington in the late 1950s and 60s, DOC excavated on the Olympic Peninsula coast at Toliak, White Rock, and Sand Point. And if some of you haven't seen it, I think we have a couple of pictures of DOC in there from Toliak, and if you're trying to figure out which person you're looking for, look for Brad Pitt with a cigar. In 1966, he began 13 years' work at Ozette. In 1969, he diverted down to the Menard site at Ocean Shores. And in 1977, he and Dale started the Hoko River Archaeological Project. And later that year, Doc with Gus served as catalyst for the Manus Mastodon excavations near Sequim, where almost 14,000 years ago, pre-Clovis hunters had killed and butchered mastodon. Of all these accomplishments, the Makah Culture and Research Center best exemplifies Doc's capacity for seeing breakthrough opportunities and making things happen. The center exists because it meets community needs, providing cultural and economic stimulus while curating and displaying the remarkable materials from Ozette. Its design and execution was done under tribal leadership. It is operated today by staff who were grade schoolers when Doc and the elders conceived of the idea over 35 years ago. Those of us who have worked with Doc through the years treasure his accomplishments such as this, and also treasure the twinkle in his eye and a broad smile hinting at what might come next. And those of us, David, and a whole bunch of us who worked with Doc, know that you were sitting there one day and he would tell you A, he would then tell you Z, walk out the room, and as Jeff and I, and probably Dave Rice had discovered, and Benny said, "You're in charge." And he would go off to some other great adventure, and we would be left there to figure out exactly how to do it. Again, another great learning experience. Doc has influenced us all with his insight of bringing diverse folks together, as we can see here in this room today. He brought us together, made us work together, let us work together to assure the project's success. I'm sure all of us remember the many fine friends who are no longer with us today. There were peers such as Pete Rice, Roel Frixell, Frank Lee and Hardy, community leaders such as Ed Kaplanaho, George Beauchamp, Gene Parker, colleagues such as Jerry Grasso, and students such as Jan Friedman and Marion Fiskin, and of course many, many others. Most especially, we miss the presence of Phyllis Doherty, and wouldn't Phyllis be pleased that we were all gathered together here today? I think we've all been touched by Phyllis one time or another during our life. But aren't we pleased to be here bridging the years and thanking the Silver Fox, as one student referred to him in a letter. We're thanking him for all he has done for us both professionally and personally. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you, Paul. And Phyllis was our mother in many ways, and we do know she's here watching this too. Well, we're going to have a few themes, samples of some people talking that have to do with what Doc's contributed to us, and I'm going to take on really how Doc and his approach to working with tribes influenced us, because this was pretty early work, this kind of equal partnership that he developed. And I'm going to tell a little story about that. I was asked by a Dr. Francisco Menotti of Switzerland to contribute to a worldwide volume he's working on called a Oxford textbook on wetland archaeology. And I think Barbara Purdy is contributing to that from Florida. Right, Barbara? Where's Barbara? Right? I think so. And anyway, they wanted me to do two things. One, he wanted me to tell the history of wet site archaeology on the Northwest Coast. And I know I could get a lot of things from Ruth, from Ozette, and I did. And the second thing was, how did you get involved with the Indians on these projects? And Europeans are always fascinated by that. So I had to think a bit about that second question, because really I just went to Ozette and that's the way it was done. Fell into this process. So I figured if I want the answer to that question, I need to go talk to Dr. Doherty. And so I did. I went to his home and said, how did you form partnerships with Indians in our archaeological work like you've done? Very early, too. And some of you may not know this, but he was originally an ethnographer. He worked for 7 months with the Hoh tribe, and his field notes were just recently published in the Journal of Northwest Anthropology, which we have available in here with their Ruth and Dick's book. Jay Miller, who helped him write it, is here, right, Jay? And they brought a lot of these, and we'll be selling them for $15 each. And that all goes to our anthropology club. So, and of course, we'll have Ruth and Dick sign your book too, their new recent book on archaeology in Washington. Anyway, so he did that, and then he also got an interest in archaeology after he got involved with the UW Field School on the San Juan Islands. Was Roy Carlson on that field school? I'm not sure if he was. Roy? I know you were in the, where's Roy? Anyway, is Roy here? I know he's here. Oh, was he? You would remember. The field school. But anyway, he got involved in the San Juans in archaeology, went on to survey the whole west coast of Washington, found Ozette, and knew that this was the site he wanted to dig or wanted to explore. And when he was explaining this, he said, well, you know, if you really wanted the answer to that, you got to go interview Ed Kaplanaho, because when he did an NSF proposal to do the work in the 60s, he needed permission from the Makah Tribal Council. And so I thought, well, that's a good idea, and I was so glad I did get a chance to interview Ed Kaplanaho, because he has recently gone home a few years back. Is Thelma here? I'm not sure if Thelma. Not here yet, or is she not? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, but Thelma, but Ed was a cougar. You know, he went to WSU, casually met Dick, because Dick agreed to go to their Christian club and talk about his archaeological work, and he met Ed as a student over there. Well, when he wanted to do this proposal, I wanted to do this project, the tribal council, Ed was a young council member at the time, and the tribal council says, you're a cougar, Ed, it's your call. You tell us if you want to do this project with Dr. Richard Doherty, and he thought, well, we're trying to make sure that BIA doesn't surplus Ozette, and we want to make sure it's proven to be Makah. So he thought it was a pretty good idea, and they went ahead with it. And then, as you know, in the winter of the late 1969-70, houses started to wash out at Ozette. Well, Ed's chairman at that time, and he hears that people are vandalizing the site, taking artifacts out of Ozette, paddles and boxes. So he gets some council people in a powerboat from Nia Bay, sends them down to stop these collectors. And Dale Johnson was one of the council members. He told me they go from Nia Bay on this powerboat clear down to Ozette, and sure enough, there's people there picking things out of the walls, and they go ashore and they invoke, this is what Ed tells them to do, invoke the U.S. Antiquities Act of 1906, confiscate all their artifacts. They did, and they got all the artifacts and told them, yeah! And then, you know, he did call Dick next and says, we got to do something about these houses, and that's where that began the extension of the partnership. But this is two amazing personalities. You know, Ed Kaplanaho was an amazing personality, and as a tribal leader, and Dick as a lead archaeologist. You know, it takes that kind of combination to forge ahead in Indian archaeology, equal partnership approach. And it's become more of the standard throughout the country. Slow but sure, not as fast as you might think, but this was started by Doc and Ed very, very early. Fortunately, I recorded all this information Ed and Dick gave me, and this book will be coming out in August, so we'll have it all well documented, how we did get involved with tribes at that time. Dr. Francisco Manolti, from Switzerland, emailed me yesterday, and he just wanted me to send his greetings to Dr. Doherty and stating he's a milestone for wetland archaeological research. So they know you all over the world, Doc. Okay, well, I would like to open the program now to the Makahs, and some others who would like to do a presentation on behalf of some of the leadership at Chehalis.
Paul mentioned Dr. Doherty taught people a lot about tribes and archaeologists working together. And I think that our example is probably one of the best that you can find in the country of tribes and scientists collaborating in order to really understand fully what our past meant to us and means to us today. Our tribal council put together a resolution in honor of Doc's 90th birthday, and so I want to read to you what they said. Resolution number 4812 of the Makah Tribal Council. Whereas the Makah Tribal Council is the governing body of the Makah Indian Tribe of the Makah Indian Reservation in Washington by authority of the Constitution and bylaws of the Makah Indian Tribe as approved on May 16, 1936 by the Secretary of the Interior, and whereas the Makah Tribal Council is responsible for the health, safety, and welfare of the Makah Tribe, and whereas the Makah Tribal Council has organized and will participate in the honoring of Richard D. Doc Doherty at his 90th birthday on March 30th, 2012 in Olympia, Washington, and whereas Dr. Doherty was the first person the Makah tribe contacted upon learning the news about the Ozette village being exposed during the winter storms, and whereas Dr. Doherty was the principal investigator at the Ozette village for the duration of the archaeological excavations and beyond through to the scientific research at this southernmost village of the Makah people, and whereas Dr. Doherty was entrusted with the stories that have been handed down through the generations that helped guide the science that was being employed during his work, and whereas Dr. Doherty was instrumental in supporting the efforts for the planning and building of the Makah Cultural and Research Center that now displays a portion of the wealth of our Ozette ancestors, and whereas through Dr. Doherty's mentorship, a number of Makahs have been inspired to work in the area of cultural resource protection, archaeology, anthropology, and museum studies, and whereas the Makah Tribal Council wishes to acknowledge the time-honored participation and leadership of Dr. Doherty at the occasion of his birthday, now therefore it be resolved, the Makah Tribal Council hereby pays special tribute to Dr. Richard Doc Doherty and honors him through the centuries-old traditions of the Makah by way of cultural presentations, and be it further resolved that the Makah Tribal Council wishes to maintain a permanent record of the special relationship between the tribe and the professor for all time. Signed by Michael J. Lawrence, Vice Chairman of the Makah Tribal Council. So we'd like to present this. You want to bring it to him? We also have another gift for Dr. Doherty that one of our carvers made, carver by the name of Bill Martin, Frank Smith's grandson. And so we wanted to also present this to Dr. Doherty. You know, we as Makah people understand that we're very special. We have a long history of being at the very northwest tip of the Olympic Peninsula. We're a proud people who've maintained really important parts of our cultural traditions. We're a whaling tribe. We think we have, really good-looking women in our tribe. And we're very, very unique because we have one of the best preserved pre-contact collections of archaeological material in the country. And we have that connection, we'll always maintain that connection with Dr. Doherty because of that. He was so progressive. He worked, as Paul said, with elders in order to gain a full understanding at the time when that wasn't common necessarily in archaeology. And so he was able to work with so many of our parents and grandparents. We have folks here who excavated with Dr. Doherty, Dean and Joe and Greg and Kirk. Shirley was on the tribal council, so we have people whose lives he's touched for decades, and we really, really honor the connection that we've had. We really are proud that we've maintained the relationship with you and that you taught your students how to maintain relationships with tribes. So we appreciate that, and we really always will. So happy birthday, Doc.
Thank you, Janine and all the Makah elders, Mabel. I heard a story from Mike Doherty yesterday, and I thought I would bring it up because that's how excited I knew the Makahs were. He was having his hair cut last week, and there was Joe McGimsky. Joe McGimsky, I'm going to tell a story on you if that's okay. Ah, don't do that. Never mind, the bet's off. So Joe, I'll pay you too, Joe. But Joe's getting his hair cut too, and Mike says, Joe says, I've got to clean up. I'm going to Dr. Doherty's 90th birthday party, and I brought that up to him too. I said, hey, Joe, you got to come up here. I got something for you. But I bought him, just for letting me tell that story, I bought him what do they call it? A Mega Millions, Joe. 2 of them. I get 10% now. They said it's 650 million, but thank you for letting me. And he does look really clean, doesn't he? 650 million. And you can't have the mic. And like I said, I'm very honored that we are in the Squaxin traditional territory, and we have Jeremiah George, who's the head of the Canoe family. I'm going to ask him just to come up and say a few words about the canoe journey that they're hosting July 29th through August 5th, if you don't mind. Jeremiah, thank you for coming. And let me point out, this Jeremiah George is Big Bill Penn's grandson. Mert Penn is his grandmother, and she lives at Squaxin, and that would be his grandmother. So thank you, Jeremiah.
It's a big honor to be here for such an occasion. As Dale had mentioned, that my grandfather, his name was William Big Bill Penn, from Quileute. He also resided for a time in Makah as well, so I have family there. So it's good to see my relatives come to our territory for this occasion as well. And in honor of Doc Doherty's 90th birthday, I wanted to sing our family love song from Squaxin, the Bagley love song. That song was taken from an old recording of my grandmother, Florence Saigo. I think my mother had found that in the University of Washington archives. And like I said, it's an honor to be here. I believe Dr. Doherty may have spent some time with my grandfather. So it's an honor to be here, to be a part of this. Mentioned that my mother wishes she could have been here, but she's having a little bit of joint problems. Though she's still young at 53, she's been a fisherwoman all of her life, so she's experiencing a small amount of physical problems. But she wishes she would be here, but I wanted to sing that song in your honor, so thank you.
We actually recognized Doc Doherty a few years ago. We honored him for career achievement with our State Historic Preservation Officers Award. And one of the things that, well, actually, Dr. Rob Whitlam wrote me this piece for our award ceremony about the great things Doc did for Washington State archaeology, and I got halfway through it and I got really bored and I threw it out. So I think the thing that is most important about Doc that a lot of people don't realize is that when it came to the National Historic Preservation Act, Doc was instrumental in getting that passed. Paul Gleason kind of glossed over that. But understand that most archaeologists would not be here in this room today doing anything if Doc hadn't worked with Senator Scoop Jackson and Warren Magnuson to make them understand the value of archaeology. When you read the history of the National Historic Preservation Act, you hear a lot about Lady Bird Johnson, and you hear a lot about the fellow who ran the National Trust for Historic Preservation. When you look at the legislative and congressional history of the Act, there was one hearing for the Act in the Senate, and there was one hearing for the Act in the House of Representatives, which is kind of amazing when you think about how Congress works today, that there's like one hearing on anything. And the lobbyists, there were lobbyists, but they didn't quite have the power. I mean, I can't imagine Exxon allowing the act to get passed in this day and age, but it got passed. But the person who passed it was Scoop Jackson. He actually, like a football, tucked it under his arm and ran it through the Senate. And it was because Doc had spent time with him educating him about the importance of archaeology. There were two things that inspired Senator Jackson. Well, the tale is, one was the Bigelow House, and he thought that was very important in Olympia, but the other piece was archaeology. So it's really important to remember that without Doc, Rick McClure would not be working for the Forest Service, Gary Wesson would not have a contract business, Janine would not be the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, I would not be the State Historic Preservation Officer, Rebecca would have to have another job entirely, and it's because of Doc that we are all here, and that anybody cares about archaeology. In fact, Scott Williams wouldn't be here trying to make sure DOT doesn't pave over burials again. So, and it's because of Doc. It's because of Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. That's the only thing that protects archaeological sites in this nation. That really is. And in this state, actually, because of Doc, we have some of the strongest archaeological laws in the nation. I explain to private property owners over and over again when they call up and scream that they have an archaeological site on their property, that this is one of the very few states in the entire U.S. that protects archaeological sites on private property. It's one of maybe three states that do that, and that is the legacy of Doc Doherty. So everybody here understand that if it wasn't for Doc, we'd all be driving taxi cabs with our archaeological degrees. So thank you, Doc, for making sure we were all employed. And thank you, and it's really for the entire United States, because every state has a State Historic Preservation Office. Every state now protects archaeological sites, and it was thanks to your behind-the-scene work with our senators in the 1960s. So from a nationwide standpoint, thank you.
I'm Dave Rice. I have a footnote to Allison's comment. Passing a federal law is one thing, making it work is another. When the law was passed, it was governed primarily by historians. And so the problem in its actual execution is that archaeological sites were not being considered in spite of what the original intent was. The way this was countered is through some executive branch action and Doc Doherty's appointment to the President's Advisory Committee on Historic Preservation. This enabled him to exert some influence on turning the intent back to include archaeological sites. One of the first items was National Historic Landmark status for Marmas Rock Shelter in 1968. This helped to turn the tide and attention towards archaeology and towards the Moss-Bennett bill that occurred in 1974 that actually provided the funding base for the federal archaeologists that are a part of this group here today. Footnote.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Benny Keel. For those of you who weren't at Marmas, Benny was there.
Doc, I'm so happy to be here with you and Ruth and Rick and Melissa and a number of wonderful friends to celebrate your 90th birthday. "44 years ago, when I became your student, we couldn't have anticipated a day like today. You mean so much to all of us, and I know I can never repay the kindness, encouragement, and support you've given me as a student and as a colleague. I put a little PowerPoint presentation together, and I'll share it with you later. And I'm especially grateful for the confidence you showed in me. I'd applied for the doctoral program at Washington State University because of my interest in the multidisciplinary approaches for studying the past. Not only was I admitted to the Quaternary Studies program, I was awarded an NDEA fellowship. My family and I left North Carolina in mid-August, and we arrived in Pullman on an early September Friday. The following morning, I went to Pine Manor, where I found you returning from Ozette, met Paul Gleason. You asked me, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from North Carolina." Doc says, "Well, we have a faculty member from your part of the country." And I said, "Well, who's that?" He said, "Carl Gustafson. He's from Kansas." I took your grant writing seminar that fall, and I learned from you, what I learned from you is there are no good or bad grant proposals, only funded ones and unfunded ones. What I learned from you has served me well, as each proposal I submitted during my career was successful. I didn't learn a lot of archaeology from Doc, but I learned a lot about archaeology as a business. I learned that you needed to be prepared when you were giving presentations, and it has served me well. I'd get to know you a lot better the next summer at Marmas Rock Shelter. In the spring semester of 1968, I took Rolf Fritzell's physical stratigraphy of archaeological sites, and one of the things we had to do was draw profiles of the Marmas excavations to scale. I completed my drawing. To avoid doing another one, I asked Fritz if I could try to find the remains that had been discovered in the floodplain earlier. I did not want to draw any more little bitty rocks. Well, I was lucky, and we found more of the earliest human remains known at that time in the New World. We also found fragments of an antler foreshaft and a bone needle. You and Fritz commenced to raise funds for emergency data recovery effort, as the site was to be flooded the following winter. And you were successful, as usual, getting funds from the Army Corps of Engineers. I, a lowly graduate student, was asked to become a member of the senior field staff, which was composed of you, Fritz, Dr. Henry Irwin, and Barbara Daniels, who was our lab supervisor for the final excavations. You and Fritz were to handle administration, public relations, strategy, and oversight. Dr. Irwin and I were to direct the day-to-day field investigations. Dr. Irwin and I had different management styles and approaches to field work, which caused difficulties with the crew. I suggested to you it might be better if I resigned and returned to Pullman for the second term of summer school. And you said, let me discuss this with Fricks. Well, you did, and called me down to your quarters and asked me to stay on. Dr. Irwin went back to Pullman to write a grant proposal for the Paleolithic cave investigations in Spain. We were all pleased that his proposal was funded for the following summer, and I'm most grateful for the confidence you showed in me. I'd read your Lynn Cooley report and mentioned that I'd like to visit the site, and just a few days later, you said, let's go to Lynn Cooley tomorrow. And so we did, and it's just another one of the kindnesses that Doc showed me when I was in graduate school here. Through the summer, our crew slept in tents, but with winter approaching, we weatherized all the buildings left on the Marms farm. Do you remember that? Nailed them up in black plastic to make them windproof and warmer. Some of the folks moved into the Marmas Root Shelter, and Paul and Madge and Gleason and their two daughters lived in spacious quarters, which was a chicken coop. The results of our summer's efforts were terrific, and you and Fricks convinced Senator Magnuson that the site should be saved for future investigation. The senator added an amendment to a Corps bill that directed the Corps to develop a plan to protect the site. The Corps' plan was to build a cofferdam around the site, and unfortunately, the cofferdam failed and the site was inundated. I didn't work at Ozette, thank goodness, but I did visit the site in 1974. On passing my comprehensive exam in September of 1969, I returned to my job at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where I wrote my dissertation, which I successfully defended in 1972. In June 1976, I accepted a job with the National Park Service as the chief of the Interagency Archaeological Services Program in Atlanta, Georgia. In 1980, I was promoted to the Departmental Consulting Archaeologist in Washington, D.C. And shortly after my arrival, you convinced my boss, Hope Moore, that the National Park Service fund the analysis and report preparation of the final Ozette reports. Hope wanted to fund this enterprise, but did not have the funds to do so. She came to me to see if I had funds, and I told her no. But there are several $100,000 in the IS Atlanta overhead accounts that could be reprogrammed. I told her I could not reprogram funds, but the director could. Well, she convinced the director it was a worthy project, and he reprogrammed the funds for us. She directed with me to work directly with you, and you and I delegated the initial work to Glenadine Williams on my staff, and you had Paul Gleason carry the ball for you. When we reached agreeable terms, we awarded WSU $290,000, and a few months later, we increased that amount to $440,000. Once the contract was in place, I transferred it to the National Park Service Pacific Northwest region to administer. All the work was completed in 1992. My relationship with you is one of my most valued. Your influence on my career is incalculable, and I thank you, and many happy returns. Now that you've heard me speak, people have accused me of having a southern drawl. When I met Paul that first Monday in Pullman, I was introduced to his down east brogue. A few days later, or a few weeks later, Jerry Landy, who was one of our coordinates, said, "We don't understand how you and Paul have become such good friends, because we don't understand a word that either of you say."
Yeah, and the following year, I was directly out of probably 22 years in Sudden, New England, and I could sort of wax poetic on that, but one of the grad students the following year seriously suggested that Benny and I should take English as a second language. At this point, I would like to introduce Barbara Purdy. Barbara was one of the sort of heroes when we all went off to field school in 1966. She was a graduate student with great insight, and we all looked up to her, although she was only as tall as she is now.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very, very much to all the people that put this together. This is absolutely a wonderful tribute to Dick Doherty. Also, after almost 60 years of social and professional interaction with Dick Doherty, I'm having a very hard time trying to think of any story that I can tell that might be appropriate for this group. I, however, did think of one. Dick showed up at our house one day, and he was unannounced, and he brought with him an unwelcome companion, a very small puppy that he decided that we needed. And the puppy's name was Spalding, named after a very prominent California archaeologist, Albert Spalding, some of you may know. Dick absolutely insisted that we wanted that dog. And finally we ended up with that dog, and we called it Squirt. But every time Dick would come around, he would call that dog Spalding, you beauty. But we did have a tremendous social party fun group that lasted for years in Pullman. However, I did secretarial service for the archaeology laboratory at Washington State University, but my only archaeological experience in Washington was Ozette. And I was out there, I think, the very first year, 1966, and then we left, and I've been in Florida ever since. However, Ozette impacted my entire future career, and so I decided I'd write a poem. And it may sound like Edgar Allan Poe. Many, many years ago, in an old village by the sea, labored an archaeologist whom you may know by the name of Richard Doherty. And that site we call Ozette is world famous ever yet. Here's to you, Dick. It's hell in the field.
Okay, we'd like to move on, and we have one of Doc's colleagues who I always enjoyed meeting. He and his wife showing up at the site. And Roy Carlson, you want to come up and explain what it was like to be, I think, a graduate student at about the same time as Doc?
Oh, how did you know what I was going to talk about, Paul? Yeah. Well, you know, I don't think I can do one-upmanship on Ruth's poem. I can think of a limerick or two, but I don't think I'll say them. Anyway, when we think of Dick, you know, we think of, and archaeology, we think of Washington State University. But we've got to remember that Dick was a product of the expansion of anthropology following World War II, that he's also a product of the public school system in the state of Washington, and that he went to the University of Washington as Erna Gunther was trying to expand the department in the late 40s and the early 50s. As Dale mentioned already, Dick was a participant in the Cattle Point Field School on San Juan Island in the late 40s. This was really the first major excavation of a Northwest Coast shell midden. Dick also did a survey of coastal Washington. And I think we have all heard of the site that he discovered at that time, the Ozette site. Now, the University of Washington at the time was really a marvelous place for a student. That the faculty were both old and young. The older ones had been students of Boas or of Kroeber for the most part. The younger ones were just getting going. And it was really a very delightful place to be. Now, of course, the ruling field, of course, was ethnography. And of course, Dick was originally destined to become an ethnographer. In fact, I think he was going to do a thesis on the hoe, if I remember correctly. I've often wondered why he shifted. That I suspect it may have been when he discovered that Ozette site on the coast of Washington, or maybe he realized early on that the contributions to Aboriginal culture in the Northwest were going to come from archaeology. No matter how many elderly informants you interviewed, the new things were going to come from digging. And of course, another reason he may have shifted was the discovery of the Lint Coulee site. That this provided the opportunity of giving something really new and different to Northwest archaeology. That I was on that's the only dig I was ever on with Dick. That was 1951. It was my 21st birthday. We all went to the pub. Guess who they asked for ID? Dick, not me, even though it was legal at the time. And of course, I see Dick hasn't really changed that much since. Now, while the anthropology department was wonderful at the time, a disaster actually set in. I think the first event was when Paul Kirchhoff, who was a cultural historian covering Mesoamerica, went to Mexico to visit his wife, and they would not let him back in the country. That they discovered he had been a communist instead of a Nazi during World War II in Germany. So that was the first disaster. The second, well, Erna Gunther had been head of the museum, head of the department and director of the museum. And she wanted to step down, just retaining the directorship of the museum. And Sud Davidson, one of our favorite professors, was destined to become the head. And then it was in 52 or 53 at Christmas, he suddenly died. And the department did nothing to bring in someone as a new head of the anthropology department. So the university administration brought in a new head who said, well, I'm going to get rid of everyone who doesn't have tenure. And he did. Bill Elmendorf was fired, Bill Massey was fired, Doug Osborne, who was heading the archaeology program, was fired. Others left. They simply did not like it. Overnight, the department changed from a department of four-field Boasian archaeology into one emphasizing social organization of New Guinea. The archaeology students fled. That I went into the Army, but after that I went on to the University of Arizona. Al Bryan and Tommy Kehoe went to Harvard. Claude Warren, I think, finished an MA and went on to one of the California universities. And essentially, the archaeology program at the University of Washington collapsed. Fortunately, Dick was already long on the faculty at WSU. I'm sure he could see what was happening, and he stepped into the breach and created a very strong program that exists up to this day. Thank you, Dick.
Well, don't look at your program because we're going to do a couple of short detours before we let Ruth and the surprised person up here. So first of all, we'd like to have Sam Leonhardy come up for a second.
This is purely extemporaneous, Doc. Many, many years ago, about 1965, my late ex-husband, Frank, joined the WSU graduate student group. There were a lot of young men coming in at the same time, and they were all older. None of the young stuff. They'd all been working. Frank ended up being your first PhD student. And alas, he was really remiss in that he went ahead and had a heart attack so that you couldn't put the thing on him, the hood. And the next year, you were able to. So from that time on, we always thought of you as our savior because we had 2 children. Frank had a heart attack as a graduate student, and you took us under your wing, and you got us insurance, and we were able to survive. The other thing, which I told you just a little while ago, that I remember I see you in my dreams at times. We had, back then, really, really good parties, and we partied hard. And we had a party at Frank and I's house one time. Well, it wasn't one time, it was a lot. And Doc was there, along with a few others, and I missed Doc and went out on the front porch, and he had taken my son's tricycle, which was blue, and he was riding up and down our sidewalk saying, "Hooray." And all of a sudden, here came a young man down our steps, and he went over and he touched Doc on the arm. And he said, "Dad, my mom says it's time to come home." And Doc said, "Not now, I'm having fun." And Rick said, "Dad, Mom says now." And he even left without putting the tricycle back. Happy birthday, Doc.
Thank you, Sam. We were neighbors in Pullman with Ray Durian, and one thing I still have, and some of you will remember, Paul will, I have a Leonhardy box. It's a wooden box that he used in his field. Anyway, we want you to talk to Doc and thank him personally, but I do have 2 more presentations. Dean Parker has a presentation from Makah, who his dad was Gene Parker, who was an amazing leader of the Makah tribe as well. Thank you, Dean.
First of all, I want to wish Dr. Doherty a very, very happy birthday to you, and plenty, plenty more. It was quite an honor to take part of working down at the OZ site, to work with some special people like Jeff and Paul and Dale. It's something that I will never, ever forget. And it's just an honor to take that in. It'll never, ever go away. And I just want to thank you, Paul. I had a great, great time down there. And that's just filling to my heart. And I thank everybody for coming over here to celebrate the birthday boy. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Some of you may know his little brother, Justin Parker, who works at the Northwest Indian Fish Commission. Well, he'd be here, but his little brother's with Billy Frank in D.C. Billy Frank was going to be here too, but if he could, but he's in D.C. I'd like to also have Ben Abbey. Ben was one of the founding, I should say, one of the earliest students for the 1970 excavations with me. Ben was the lead anthropologist at North Seattle Community College for a long time, a founding faculty member. Ben?
Happy birthday, Doc. It's been a while since I saw you. I know I never took a class from you, but you've always been an inspiration to me and to what I've done in the last 40 years plus of my life since I left WSU. And I was one of the early people at Rosette Excavation with Dale and several other people, Ed Friedman, and a few others that I just met here today after several years. I also like to mention that I was at that time the only African in your school, in the department. And the courtesy that you gave to me and the due diligence and the diligence that you showed and the love for archaeology made me even love archaeology a lot more. I didn't do archaeology. I was a human biologist, physical anthropologist. But I can tell you that I did, however, do work at Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania. I did work at Kubifora in northern Kenya for several years. And I can tell you that I learned all the importance of tying culture to the people from you, Dr. Doherty, and I appreciate that. And when I was coming here today, my wife unfortunately couldn't come, but I asked her, I said, what should I take for Doc? She said, you know, take something African. I did not bring you a loincloth though, but I brought you something else. So I said, what is it? She said, well, you know, when he did the work with the Ozette, with the Makah in Niamey, one of the things that was so interesting and so great to always look at when you go to the museum were their baskets. And so she said, well, you take one of your baskets that you've been collecting in the house from Uganda. I'm from Uganda. And take one of the baskets from Africa, because Doc never went to Africa, you know. So take him a present from Africa, and I did, and I do bring you an African basket. This is an African basket. And with it, I have 2 napkin holders from Uganda and from my people. So I welcome you, thank you, happy birthday, and many, many more returns.
Well, I just want to thank you all for coming. This is just a wonderful occasion. Dick says he now has arrived at the twilight of youth, and he hopes you'll all stick around for his 100th.
Oh. I'm just about as old as most of the sites in the state. You know, we started doing archaeology in Washington, and we had people in Congress who were right in the right positions. Jackson and Magnuson on the Appropriation Committee, Jackson in the House and Senate Interior Committee. And so we really had good things going. We had source of funding. They were interested and they were very good and in helping create laws in the nation, and very good. And so I was back and forth to Washington, and it was a wonderful experience, helping to develop programs. And of course, there were other people in the nation who were involved in, first of all, the small committees, and then it grew and grew. But, you know, history of archaeology in our state was a wonderful thing. I grew up being kind of an outdoors guy, you know, going around hunting, fishing, gathering. And I really took to the idea of archaeology and going out. We had the proper people in the state. They put me on committees, and you know, our legislatures developed laws and so forth, and we had programs going throughout the state. And it was possible to develop programs at the universities for students in anthropology and archaeology. And gradually the program throughout the Northwest grew and grew and grew. The administration always loved me because I was bringing in big grants, and big grants had great overhead. And overhead helped develop the department and so forth. And you know, it was just a wonderful experience, everything going on. We had great people in the media out that were writing about it in the newspaper, in the media of all types. And it was just a great program. Dams were being built, roads were being built. There was funding to develop students in the department, big archaeology programs going, and it's been a wonderful life. I've just had a great time. I did some work, you know, on the Nile in Africa and so forth, but the Northwest was my place. And I so appreciate all the support we get from the legislature and from all of the people in the state and the media. And I think we developed great programs in all of the universities, and it's been a great life. And now, you know, I'm only 90, but that's nothing in archaeological terms. That's minimal, but it's been a great life, great students, great media people, and I've had a great life, and thank you very much.
Well, we have one final fun thing to do, and Leslie Wilderson has been putting on performances various and sundry places for years. Not the least of it, of course, was things like her dissertation defense and a few other things. But anyway, Leslie will be up here. I've got some words to pass around, and sort of pay attention. She tends to change direction at times.
While he's passing out the interactive part of this, I just want to say a couple of things. One is that we have experienced some lovely and moving songs here. We have experienced a lovely and moving poem. And this is going to be something a little bit different, as you might expect. So, everybody have there's also a typo, which you'll figure it out. Aha. Okay. One morning back in 1922, a baby boy was born, known to me and you. As the silver fox, he changed everything, and it is his story we'll briefly sing. Here's the interactive part. Toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay, toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay. The silver fox, he changed everything, and it is his story we'll briefly sing. His long-range vision he would never skimp. His eyes were trained by piloting a blimp. He looked for early man and he found him too in the channeled scablands northwest of WSU. Toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay, toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay. He looked for early man and he found him too in the channeled scablands northwest of WSU. Lind Coulee, Windust Cave, and Marmosites, then Manus Mastodon, he got him dead to rights. But the biggest triumph he would e'er beget was his long-term project out at Ozette. Toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay, toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay. The biggest triumph he would e'er beget was his long-term project out at Ozette. But more than just the archaeology, he taught us how to function in the world we see. From writing proposals to getting budgets passed, he made sure our programs were not half. Toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay, toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay. From writing proposals to getting budgets passed, he made sure our programs were not half. Now I've got to turn mine over. One more verse. Quaternary studies gave us a good worldview, a perspective on the old that made it new. So here's to a guy who knows when to make a fuss. We were grateful always for what you taught us. Toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay, toora-lura-lura, toora-lura-lay. So here's to a guy who knows when to make a fuss. We're grateful always for what you taught us. And while I'm up, let's just go directly into a rousing version of Happy Birthday. If I can figure out. How about a different key? That's too low for me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Doc. Happy birthday to